so many of the patients that make their way into my office after sustaining some sort of head injury report symptoms of feeling lightheaded, particularly during positional changes, such as progressing from the lying position to the standing position. In a 2021 study, they took 214 adolescents who had sustained a concussion within the last 10 days, and they followed up with those kids until they had either recovered or for up to 4 months. And they defined recovered as a return of the symptoms to baseline and a normal physician-performed physical examination. They then took these kids through an assessment that consisted of the patients lying on their back for 2 minutes, taking their blood pressure, then asking them to stand up, and then performing a second measurement after standing for 1 minute. And the patient was then asked to report any symptoms of lightheadedness, dizziness, or feeling faint due to that positional change. And they came to the conclusion that male and female acutely injured adolescents with concussion experience symptoms of lightheadedness and dizziness upon postural changes significantly more often than healthy adolescents. However, they did not more often meet standard orthostatic hypotension criteria. I get a little giddy when I read this because this is exactly what I see in my office all the time. Patients will make their way into my office after seeing a number of other providers who told them that everything's fine. You're normal, but the patient doesn't feel normal. So now, what are you supposed to do? Let's backtrack a little bit and go back to what they stated in the article. They state that male and female acutely injured adolescents with concussion experience symptoms of lightheadedness and dizziness upon postural changes significantly more often than healthy adolescents. However, they did not more often meet standard orthostatic hypotension criteria. So what does that mean? What is the orthostatic hypotension criteria? Well, according to the American Autonomic Society, orthostatic hypotension is defined as a 20 millimeter of mercury or greater reduction in the systolic blood pressure or a 10 millimeter of mercury or greater reduction in the diastolic blood pressure after 1 minute and 3 minutes of standing from the supine position or lying position. And here's the problem, or at least one of the problems within healthcare today. In order to meet the criteria for this diagnosis, one must have a reduction in their systolic blood pressure by 20 millimeters of mercury or more. But what if they only have a 15-point reduction? Well, technically, you don't meet the diagnosis. And in that case, since you don't meet the diagnosis, you now can't receive the treatment. So guess what? These patients just end up slipping through the cracks and crossing their fingers that their blood pressure tanks just a little bit more when they go see the next provider and have the next test done. And that's unfortunate, but that's the world that we live in and the hoops that you have to jump through when it comes to our healthcare system today. Now, with all that being said, what technically leads someone to feeling lightheaded when they're changing positions? In this article, they state that the symptoms of lightheadedness upon standing is thought to emanate from cardiovascular autonomic dysfunction as the brain experiences a sudden instability in the cerebral perfusion pressure that may precipitate symptoms that typically are short-lived. So I like using analogies because I think it makes things easier to comprehend and digest. So the example that I often use with patients who are experiencing lightheadedness upon positional changes such as standing is to imagine that I have an empty cup and I place that cup underneath the faucet. And let's say that I keep that cup underneath the faucet for 10 seconds and then I flip it over and then I fill it up again. In that 10 seconds, the cup will have filled up a fairly good amount, right? Now compare that to if I only hold the cup under the faucet for a single second. I'll be flipping the cup over more frequently, but there won't be a whole lot of water within that cup. The same thing applies to the heart. When I stand up, the blood within my cranial vault is going to start coming down just because that's the way that gravity works. However, we need to have a mechanism to get that blood back up to the head because, as we stated before, lightheadedness is due to a sudden instability in cerebral perfusion, meaning not enough blood in your head. But now go back to the analogy that I gave you earlier with the cup and the faucet. It becomes a finely orchestrated event to be able to pump the heart just a little bit faster so that you can restore the perfusion of blood within your head, but not too fast because remember, as your heart beats faster and faster, there becomes less and less time between each contraction. And between each contraction is when your heart is actually filling.